The trunk lid flew open under Emma Rutherford's trembling hands, revealing nothing but emptiness where her entire dowry should have been. And in that moment, 3 days before her wedding, she understood that her carefully planned future had just shattered like glass against stone. Her father's life savings, the money that was supposed to secure her marriage to Gerald Winters, the banker's son from Cheyenne, had vanished sometime during the night while the whole household slept peacefully under the Wyoming stars. Emma's mother found her on the floor of her bedroom in their modest home on the outskirts of Laramie, Wyoming. Her wedding dress spread across the bed like a ghost, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the violated trunk that had been locked with her father's own key. "Mama, it is gone," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "Every cent Papa saved for 15 years, the $2,000, all of it." Margaret Rutherford's face went white as fresh snow. "That cannot be. Your father checked it just yesterday evening." "Someone picked the lock or stole the key," Emma said, turning the empty trunk toward her mother. The silk lining had been disturbed, and the false bottom her father had installed for extra security lay open and ransacked. "Gerald's family expects this dowry. His father made it clear that the marriage was contingent upon it. What am I going to do?" Her mother sank onto the bed beside the wedding dress, her hands shaking as they smoothed the delicate lace. "We will tell your father. He will know what to do." But Thomas Rutherford, when he thundered into the room 15 minutes later, his face red with fury and despair, had no solutions. He was an honest ranch foreman who had spent every spare dollar for Emma's future, believing that marrying her to a banker's son would give her the comfortable life he and Margaret had never known. Now that dream lay in ruins. "I will go to the sheriff," Thomas said, his voice tight with anger. Someone in this town knew about that money. Someone watched and waited. Emma followed her father into town that bright September morning in 1882, her heart heavy with dread. Laramie was a growing railroad town, full of cowboys, railroad workers, prospectors, and drifters. Finding a thief here would be like finding a specific grain of sand on an endless beach. Sheriff Morrison listened to their story with sympathy but little hope in his weathered eyes. "I will investigate, Tom. You know I will," the sheriff said, leaning back in his chair. "But between you and me, money like that could be halfway to Denver by now, or buried somewhere we will never find it. Do you have any idea who might have known about it?" Thomas shook his head miserably. "I told no one except Margaret and Emma. I withdrew it from the bank in Cheyenne over the course of 2 years so no one would notice large sums. What about the Winters family? They knew, surely." Emma felt her stomach twist. "Gerald's father knew the amount, but not where we kept it." Sheriff Morrison scratched his gray beard thoughtfully. "I hate to say it, but you might want to consider that the timing is mighty convenient for someone who might have wanted to back out of a wedding without looking like the bad party." The implication hit Emma like a physical blow. "You think Gerald or his family stole it?" "I am saying I have seen stranger things," the sheriff replied carefully. "A banker's son marrying a foreman's daughter raised some eyebrows in certain circles. Maybe someone decided the dowry should disappear to give them an excuse." Emma left the sheriff's office feeling sick. She had known Gerald Winters for 8 months, ever since he had come to Laramie to assess properties for his father's lending business. He had courted her with flowers and pretty words, and she had convinced herself that she loved him, or at least could grow to love him. Their engagement had thrilled her parents, who saw it as a step up in the world. But Emma had always sensed a coldness in Gerald, a calculation behind his smiles. She had pushed those doubts away, telling herself she was being foolish. Now those doubts came flooding back. She had to face him. Had to see his reaction when she told him the dowry was gone. The Winters family was staying at the finest hotel in Laramie, a 3-story building that catered to railroad executives and wealthy travelers. Emma climbed the stairs to their suite with her father beside her, each step feeling like a march toward execution. Gerald answered their knock with a smile that faltered when he saw their expressions. "Emma, darling, what is wrong? You look distressed." "The dowry has been stolen," she said bluntly, watching his face. "Someone broke into our home last night and took everything." Gerald's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Emma to read. Surprise, concern, and something else, something that might have been calculation. He invited them into the sitting room where his father, Henry Winters, sat reading a newspaper and smoking a cigar. When Thomas explained what had happened, Henry Winters set down his newspaper with deliberate slowness. His face was impassive, but his eyes were cold as creek water in January. "That is most unfortunate," Henry said. "Most unfortunate indeed. Gerald, perhaps you should speak with your fiancé privately." Emma's father bristled. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of me." But Gerald was already taking Emma's arm, leading her toward the window overlooking the street. His touch felt wrong somehow, too tight, too possessive. When they were out of earshot, he lowered his voice. "Emma, you must understand my position. My father agreed to this marriage based on certain assurances. A dowry of $2,000 was part of our arrangement." "I know that, Gerald, but it was stolen. We have reported it to the sheriff." "Surely you do not blame me for a theft?" His pale blue eyes would not quite meet hers. "Of course not. But without that dowry, I am afraid my father will not consent to the marriage. He has certain expectations about the financial arrangements." Emma felt something cold settle in her chest. "Are you saying you will not marry me without the money?" "I am saying my father will not allow it," Gerald corrected, as if that made it better. "Perhaps if the money is recovered we could proceed. Otherwise—" He trailed off with a helpless shrug that looked practiced. "Otherwise you want nothing to do with me," Emma finished, her voice flat. She looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how she had ever thought she could spend her life with this man. "You are calling off the wedding." "I am merely postponing it until the situation is resolved," Gerald said quickly. "There is no need to be dramatic." But Emma was already pulling the small engagement ring from her finger. It was a modest band with a tiny diamond, nothing like the jewelry she had seen on the fingers of truly wealthy women, but she had treasured it as a symbol of her future. Now it felt like a shackle. She pressed it into Gerald's palm. "Keep it," she said. "The engagement is ended. I would not marry you now if you offered me $10,000. She walked away before he could respond, her head high despite the tears burning in her eyes. Her father followed, and she heard Henry Winters say something in a low, satisfied voice to Gerald as they left. That was when Emma knew with absolute certainty that Sheriff Morrison had been right. The Winters family had stolen her dowry themselves, or paid someone to do it, so they would have an excuse to break the engagement without looking like the villains. Out on the street, Thomas Rutherford pulled his daughter into a fierce embrace. "You did the right thing, Emma girl. That man is not worthy of you." "I know, Papa," Emma said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "But what am I going to do now? I am 20 years old. I turned down other suitors for Gerald. People will say I am damaged goods, a woman whose engagement was broken." "People can go hang," her father said fiercely. "You are worth more than any dowry, more than any banker's son. The right man will see that." Emma wanted to believe him, but as they walked back through Laramie's dusty streets, she felt the weight of stares and whispers following them. News traveled fast in a town like this. By evening, everyone would know that Emma Rutherford's wedding was off and her dowry had been stolen. She would be the subject of gossip and pity, perhaps even suspicion. Some would wonder if there had ever been a dowry at all, if the whole thing was a scheme that had fallen apart. The next few days were torture. Well-meaning neighbors came by with casseroles and condolences, as if someone had died. The wedding was canceled, the small church ceremony called off, the modest reception that had been planned at the ranch owner's barn abandoned. Emma packed away her wedding dress and tried not to think about the future that had evaporated like morning dew. Sheriff Morrison came by on the fourth day with discouraging news. "I searched the area around your house, asked around town, but nobody saw anything suspicious. The lock on your trunk was picked by someone who knew what they were doing, professional-like." "I am sorry, Tom, but unless someone comes forward with information, that money is gone for good." "What about the Winters family?" Thomas demanded. "Did you question them?" "I did," the sheriff said carefully. "They claimed to be just as shocked as you." Henry Winters said he was disappointed that the marriage would not proceed, but that his son could not be expected to marry without the agreed-upon dowry. "I had no grounds to search their rooms or accuse them of anything." After the sheriff left, Emma sat on the porch of their small house and stared out at the vast Wyoming landscape. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant mountains. She had lived here all her life, had expected to leave it behind for a comfortable house in Cheyenne. Now she had no idea what came next. That was when she saw the rider approaching. He came from the direction of town, a lone figure on a rangy chestnut horse, and something about the way he sat his saddle made Emma straighten up. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who had spent more time in the saddle than on the ground, his body moving with the horse's rhythm as if they were one creature. As he drew closer, Emma could make out more details. He was young, probably not much older than her own 20 years, with dark hair that curled over his collar and a battered hat pushed back on his head. His clothes were the practical gear of a working cowboy, worn denim and a faded shirt, but everything was clean and well-maintained. A gun hung at his hip and a rope was coiled at his saddle, marking him as a ranch hand. He reined in at the fence and touched the brim of his hat politely. "Afternoon, miss. I am looking for Thomas Rutherford. This the right place?" Emma stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "It is." "He is in the barn. May I ask your business?" "Name is Samuel Stone," the cowboy said, swinging down from his horse with fluid grace. "I am looking for work, and I heard in town that Mr. Rutherford might know who is hiring around these parts. Folks said he is foreman at the Triple Creek Ranch and knows all the outfits in the area." "You are not from around here," Emma observed. His accent carried traces of Texas or perhaps Oklahoma, somewhere south and warmer than Wyoming. "No, miss. Been drifting north with the cattle drives. Thought I might settle in this area for the winter, maybe longer if I find a good outfit." His eyes were a striking gray-green, and they looked at Emma with frank appreciation but also respect. "I am sorry if I interrupted anything." "You did not," Emma said. "I will fetch my father." She went to the barn, where Thomas was mending tack, and told him about the visitor. When they returned to the house, Samuel Stone was watering his horse at the trough, speaking softly to the animal and running a hand along its neck with obvious affection. A man who cared for his horse that way was usually a decent sort, Emma had learned. Her father spent 20 minutes talking to Samuel, asking questions about his experience and references. Samuel answered honestly, explaining that he had worked ranches in Texas and Colorado, had been a drover on 2 cattle drives north, and knew horses, cattle, and ranch work. He had no family to speak of, his parents having died of fever when he was 17, and had been working his way north ever since, looking for a place that felt like home. "I am not hiring directly," Thomas said finally, "but I can give you a note to take to John Sterling at the Triple Creek. He is always looking for good hands, especially ones who know cattle. Tell him I sent you." Samuel's face lit up with a smile that transformed him from merely handsome to genuinely striking. "I appreciate that, sir, truly." As Thomas went inside to write the note, Samuel turned to Emma. "I hope you do not mind me asking, miss, but is everything all right? You seemed troubled when I rode up." Emma was startled by his directness, but something about his open, honest face made her want to answer truthfully. "My dowry was stolen a few days ago. My wedding was called off because of it." Samuel's expression shifted to one of genuine sympathy. "That is a hard blow. I am real sorry to hear it. The man must have been a fool to let you go over money." "He was a banker's son," Emma said bitterly. "Money was all that mattered to him." "Then you are well rid of him," Samuel said simply. "A woman like you deserves a man who values her for herself, not for what she brings in a trunk." The words were so direct, so certain, that Emma found herself blushing. Before she could respond, her father returned with the note. Samuel took it, thanked them both, and swung back into his saddle with that same easy grace. "I hope things improve for you, Miss Rutherford," he said, touching his hat brim again. Then he rode off toward the Triple Creek Ranch, leaving Emma staring after him with a strange flutter in her chest. "Decent young man," Thomas observed. "Good hands, knows his business, respectful. John will hire him for sure." Emma just nodded, but that night she found herself thinking about Samuel Stone's gray-green eyes and his simple, powerful words. "A woman like you deserves a man who values her for herself." It was such a contrast to Gerald's cold calculation, to the way he had measured her worth in dollars and cents. She told herself not to be foolish. Samuel Stone was just a drifting cowboy looking for work. He probably said kind things to every girl he met. But the memory of his smile lingered. 3 days later, Emma went into town to buy fabric for a new dress. She refused to hide away like some shamed woman, even though she could feel the weight of curious stares as she walked through Laramie streets. She held her head high, nodded politely to acquaintances, and tried to ignore the whispers that followed her. She was leaving the general store when she nearly collided with someone on the wooden sidewalk. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her, and she looked up to find Samuel Stone smiling down at her. "Miss Rutherford, we keep meeting, Mr. Stone," Emma said, flustered. "Did my father's recommendation work out?" "It did indeed. Mr. Sterling hired me on the spot. I have been working at the Triple Creek for 3 days now. It is a good outfit." He released her arms but did not step back immediately. "I was just heading to the telegraph office to send a message to an old friend, let him know where I landed." "What brings you to town?" "Just shopping," Emma said, lifting her parcel. "I needed fabric." They stood there in the warm September sunshine, and Emma was acutely aware of people watching them. Samuel seemed oblivious to the attention, his focus entirely on her. "Miss Rutherford, I know this is forward, but would you allow me to buy you lunch? There is a decent restaurant just down the street, and I would appreciate the company of someone who can tell me about this area. I am still learning my way around." Emma knew she should say no. She had just ended an engagement. People were already talking. Being seen with another man, especially a cowboy nobody knew, would only fuel the gossip. But something in Samuel's hopeful expression, the genuine interest in his eyes, made her want to say yes. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "Thank you." The restaurant was a simple place that served good, honest food to working men and families. Samuel held the door for her, pulled out her chair, and treated her with a courtesy that felt natural rather than practiced. Over plates of beef stew and fresh bread, he asked her about Laramie, about the ranches in the area, about what it was like to grow up in Wyoming. Emma found herself talking more freely than she had in months. Samuel listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, laughing at her stories about growing up on the edge of a rough railroad town. He told her about his own wanderings, about learning to ride and rope in Texas, about the vast spaces of Colorado and the mountains he had crossed to get here. "Why Wyoming?" Emma asked. "You could have settled anywhere." Samuel was quiet for a moment, his fingers turning his coffee cup on the table. "I wanted to find a place that felt right, I guess. Somewhere I could put down roots, build something. I spent 3 years drifting, and it gets lonely after a while. A man needs a home, needs a purpose beyond just the next job." He looked up at her. "Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," Emma said softly. "I think everyone wants to belong somewhere, to feel like they matter." "You matter," Samuel said, his voice quiet but intense. "I know I barely know you, Miss Rutherford, but I can see that you matter. The way your father speaks about you, the way you carry yourself. That banker's son was a fool." Emma felt heat rising in her cheeks. "You do not know the whole story." "I know enough," Samuel said. "I know he let you go because of money, and that tells me everything I need to know about his character." They talked for nearly 2 hours, long past when they had finished eating. Emma learned that Samuel could read and write, unusual for many cowboys, because his mother had been a schoolteacher who insisted on education. He loved horses more than cattle, dreamed of having his own small ranch someday, and had a younger sister somewhere back in Texas, whom he sent money to when he could. When Samuel finally walked her back to where she had left her father's wagon, Emma felt lighter than she had in days. He helped her up onto the seat with a hand that was calloused from hard work but gentle in its touch. "Miss Rutherford, would it be all right if I called on you?" Samuel asked, looking up at her with those remarkable eyes. "I know your situation is complicated right now, and I do not want to cause you any trouble, but I would like to see you again, if you would allow it." Emma knew what people would say. Knew that calling off one engagement and immediately entertaining another suitor would scandalize half the town. But looking down at Samuel's honest, hopeful face, she found she did not care. "I would like that very much, Mr. Stone." "Samuel," he corrected with a grin. "Please." "Then you must call me Emma." His grin widened. "I would be honored, Emma." As she drove the wagon home, Emma felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not the calculated hope of a good match and a secure future, but something wilder and more fragile. The hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find happiness after all. Thomas Rutherford was less certain about this development. When Samuel rode out to their house 2 days later, bringing wildflowers he had picked on the way, Emma's father pulled him aside for a serious conversation. "My daughter has been through a hard time," Thomas said bluntly. "She does not need another man breaking her heart." "I have no intention of breaking her heart, sir," Samuel replied steadily. "I know we have only just met, but I have never felt about any woman the way I feel about Emma. She is special, and I want to know her better. I want to court her properly with your permission." "You are a ranch hand," Thomas said, not unkindly but stating facts. "You make maybe $30 a month and keep. That is no fortune to offer a woman." "No, sir, it is not," Samuel agreed. "But it is honest money, and I have saved most of what I have earned over the past 3 years. I have nearly $400 put away. I am not rich, but I am not a penniless drifter either. I work hard. I do not drink to excess, and I do not gamble. I will treat your daughter with the respect and care she deserves." Thomas studied the young man for a long moment. $400 is more than most cowboys your age have managed to save. You are serious about settling down." "I am, sir. More serious than I have ever been about anything." In the end, Thomas gave his permission, though he warned Samuel that Emma was fragile right now and needed time to heal from her broken engagement. Samuel promised to be patient, to take things slowly, and to prove himself worthy of Emma's trust. Over the next few weeks, Samuel became a regular presence at the Rutherford home. He came by after work when he could, always bringing something, a handful of wildflowers, a pretty stone he had found by the creek, once a small carving of a horse he had whittled during quiet evenings in the bunkhouse. He helped Thomas with repairs around the property, never asked for anything in return, and treated Margaret Rutherford with such courtesy that she declared him a treasure. Emma found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that surprised her. When she saw him riding up the path, her heart would leap. They would walk together in the evening light, talking about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about the cattle he was helping move to winter pasture, about the other hands at the Triple Creek, about the mountains he could see from the ridge where he often worked. Emma told him about her dreams of having a garden someday, about the books she loved to read, about her fears that she would end up an old maid because of the scandal. "You will never be an old maid," Samuel said firmly. They were sitting on the porch steps, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You are too beautiful, too smart, too full of life. Any man would be lucky to have you. Even a man who could not offer me a dowry." Emma asked, trying to keep her tone light but hearing the bitterness underneath. Samuel turned to look at her directly. "Emma, I do not care about a dowry. I never have and I never will. When I think about marriage, about finding a wife, money is the last thing on my mind. I want a partner. Someone who understands the life I want to build, someone I can talk to and laugh with, someone who makes every day better just by being in it." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I want someone like you." Emma's breath caught. "Samuel, we have only known each other for 3 weeks." "I know," he said, "and I am not asking you to marry me right now. I know you need time, but I want you to know where my heart is heading. I want you to know that I am serious about this, about us." Emma looked down at their joined hands, his large and work-roughened, hers smaller and marked by domestic labor. "I thought I loved Gerald," she said quietly, "but I never felt with him what I feel when I am with you. He never made my heart race. He never made me laugh until my sides hurt. He never looked at me the way you do, like I am something precious." "You are precious," Samuel said, squeezing her hand, "and I will spend as long as it takes proving that to you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, and Emma felt something shifting inside her. The hurt and humiliation of her broken engagement were still there, but they were fading, being replaced by something new and hopeful and terrifying in its intensity. The turning point came in October, when the first real cold snap hit Laramie. Emma was in town again, this time with her mother, when they saw Gerald Winters coming out of the bank. He was with a young woman Emma did not recognize, a pretty blonde in an expensive traveling suit. Gerald was being attentive to her in a way he had never been with Emma, and the woman wore a large diamond ring on her finger. Emma stopped dead in the street, staring. It had been barely a month since their engagement had ended. Gerald saw her and had the grace to look uncomfortable. He nodded stiffly and tried to steer his companion away, but the woman noticed Emma's stare and stopped. "You know her, darling?" the woman asked in a high, cultured voice. "An acquaintance," Gerald said shortly. "Come along, Millicent." But Millicent was looking at Emma with curiosity. "You are the one whose dowry was stolen, are you not? Gerald told me all about it. Such a terrible thing. I cannot imagine losing all that money right before my wedding." The words were sympathetic, but there was something calculating in Millicent's eyes. Emma suddenly understood. This woman, whoever she was, came with a better dowry than Emma could have offered. Gerald had wasted no time finding a replacement, and Emma was willing to bet her last dollar that the Winters family had orchestrated the theft of her dowry to break their engagement without scandal, leaving Gerald free to pursue a wealthier prospect. "Yes, it was terrible," Emma said with icy politeness. "But as it turns out, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It showed me the true character of the man I was planning to marry." She looked directly at Gerald. "I pity you, Miss Millicent. You have no idea what you are getting into." She walked away before either of them could respond, her mother hurrying to keep up. Margaret Rutherford was silent until they reached their wagon. Then she turned to Emma with fire in her eyes. "That man is lower than a snake's belly. And I would bet my best Sunday dress that he or his father was behind the theft." "I know, Mama," Emma said. "But we cannot prove it, and honestly, I do not care anymore. Let him have his wealthy bride. I want nothing to do with him." But that night, lying in bed, Emma felt the old anger and hurt rising up again. She had been used and discarded like a worn-out dress. Her dowry, her father's life savings, was gone, and the people responsible would face no consequences. It was not fair. The next day was Sunday, and Emma went to church with her family as usual. Samuel had asked if he could accompany them, and Emma had agreed, knowing it would cause talk but no longer caring. Let people gossip. She was tired of hiding and being ashamed of something that was not her fault. Samuel arrived at their house dressed in his best clothes, which were still just clean work clothes but obviously carefully maintained. He helped Emma up into the wagon with that gentle courtesy that was becoming so familiar, then sat beside her for the ride into town. The church was full, as it always was on Sunday mornings. Emma was aware of heads turning, of whispers starting as she walked in with Samuel beside her. She kept her chin high and her eyes forward. Let them talk. The sermon was about forgiveness, about letting go of anger and trusting in divine justice. Emma tried to focus on the words, but her mind kept drifting to Gerald and his new fiancée, to the stolen money, to the unfairness of it all. After the service, as people filed out into the sunshine, Emma saw Gerald and his father standing with a group of prominent townspeople. Henry Winters was holding forth about something, his voice carrying across the churchyard. Emma tried to steer her family in another direction, but Samuel had gone still beside her. "That is him, is it not?" Samuel asked quietly. "The man who broke your engagement." "Yes," Emma said. "Please let us just go." But Samuel was watching Gerald with an expression Emma could not quite read. There was anger there, yes, but also something calculating. Before Emma could stop him, Samuel walked straight toward the group of men. "Excuse me," Samuel said, his voice carrying a polite hardness. "Mr. Winters, is it?" Gerald turned, looking confused. "Do I know you?" "No, sir, but I know you. Or at least I know what you did." Samuel's voice was still quiet, but every word cut like a knife. "You ended your engagement to Miss Rutherford because her dowry was stolen. That is what the whole town knows." "That is correct," Gerald said stiffly. "I fail to see how it is any of your business." "It became my business when I started courting Emma," Samuel said. Several people gasped, and Emma felt heat flooding her face. "And it strikes me as mighty convenient that her dowry disappeared right before your wedding, leaving you free to find a wealthier bride. That is an interesting coincidence." Henry Winters stepped forward, his face darkening. "Are you accusing my son of theft, boy?" "I am saying the timing is suspicious," Samuel replied, not backing down an inch despite the older man's intimidating presence. "I am saying that a real man would not have let Emma go even if every cent of that dowry had vanished. I am saying that she deserves better than a man who measures her worth in dollars." "How dare you?" Gerald sputtered. "You are just some itinerant cowboy. You have no right to speak to me this way." I have every right to defend the woman I love, Samuel said, and Emma's heart stopped. The whole churchyard had gone silent. Emma Rutherford is worth more than any dowry. She is kind, intelligent, beautiful, and strong. Any man who cannot see that is a fool. You let her go because of money. Fine. I do not need money to love her. I do not need a single cent. I would marry her tomorrow with nothing but the clothes on my back and consider myself the luckiest man alive. The silence stretched out. Emma stood frozen, unable to believe what she had just heard. Samuel loved her. He had declared it in front of the whole town, had defended her honor without hesitation, had stood up to men who outranked him in wealth and status without flinching. Gerald's face had gone purple. You are a fool, then. No man in his right mind marries a woman without some kind of settlement. Then I guess I am a fool, Samuel said calmly, but I would rather be a fool in love than a calculating coward. He turned his back on Gerald, a deliberate insult, and walked back to Emma. He took her hand in front of everyone. I am sorry if I overstepped. But I could not stand there and let him think he did nothing wrong. Emma looked up at him, at this cowboy who had known her for barely a month, and yet had just declared his love in the most public way possible. Her eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in weeks, they were tears of joy. You did not overstep, she said softly. You were perfect. The ride back to the Rutherford home was quiet. Thomas and Margaret exchanged looks, but neither said anything until they were back at the house. Then Thomas invited Samuel to join them for Sunday dinner, a sign of acceptance that made Emma's heart soar. Over roast chicken and vegetables, the conversation was carefully polite, touching on neutral subjects like the weather and the ranch work. But after the meal, when Margaret began clearing dishes, Samuel cleared his throat. Mr. Rutherford, Mrs. Rutherford, I need to speak plainly. I know I made a scene at church today. I know I declared feelings that maybe should have been kept private a while longer, but I meant every word I said. He looked at Emma, then back at her parents. I love your daughter. I want to marry her. I do not care that she has no dowry. I have some money saved and I am a hard worker. We would not have much to start, but I would spend every day trying to give her a good life. Thomas set down his coffee cup with a heavy thud. Samuel, you have known Emma for barely a month. I know, sir, and if you think we need more time, I will wait. I will court her properly for as long as you think necessary, but I wanted you to know my intentions are serious and honorable. Margaret spoke up, her voice gentle. Samuel, we like you, we truly do, but Emma has been through a difficult time. She thought she was in love with Gerald Winters, and look how that turned out. How do we know this is not just a reaction to that hurt? How do you know? Samuel was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking about his answer. Mrs. Rutherford, I cannot prove my feelings. I can only show you through my actions. I have spent 3 years drifting, never meeting a woman who made me want to stay in one place. Then I met Emma, and everything changed. I do not want to drift anymore. I want to build a life, and I want to build it with her. Emma, who had been silent, finally spoke. What about what I want? Everyone turned to look at her. She stood up, her hands clasped in front of her to stop them from shaking. I thought I loved Gerald, but I know now that I did not. I thought security and a comfortable life were the most important things, but I was wrong. She looked at Samuel. This past month with you has shown me what I was missing. You make me laugh. You listen when I talk. You treat me like I matter, not like a piece of property to be acquired. When I am with you, I feel alive in a way I never did with Gerald. Emma, her mother said gently, that does not mean you should rush into another engagement. I am not rushing, Emma said firmly. But I am also not going to let fear or other people's opinions dictate my life anymore. I know my own heart, Mama, and my heart is telling me that Samuel is the right man. She turned to him. If you are asking, my answer is yes, I will marry you. Samuel's face lit up with such joy that Emma felt tears spring to her eyes again. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and took both her hands in his. "You are sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "You are absolutely sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Emma said. Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Emma felt everything inside her settle into place. This was right. This was real, not a calculated arrangement or a step up in society, but genuine love. Thomas cleared his throat loudly. "Well then, I suppose we need to talk about practical matters. Samuel, you said you have savings." Samuel reluctantly released Emma and turned to her father. "Yes, sir, about $400. It is not much, but it is a start." "It is more than many men have," Thomas said. "What are your plans? Will you stay on at the Triple Creek?" "I would like to find a small place of our own eventually," Samuel said. "Maybe a few acres where we could run a small herd, raise horses. That is the long-term dream. In the short term, I will keep working at the Triple Creek and save every penny I can." They talked for hours, working out details. Samuel wanted to marry as soon as possible, but Thomas insisted on at least a 2-month engagement to give Emma time to be certain and to let the scandal of her broken engagement die down. They settled on a December wedding, a small ceremony with just family and close friends. "No big celebration," Emma said firmly. "I do not need a fancy wedding, I just need you." Samuel smiled at her across the table. "I will marry you in a barn if that is what you want. The where does not matter to me, only the who." Over the next 2 months, Emma felt like she was living in a dream. Samuel courted her with a devotion that left her breathless. He came by every evening after work, even when he was exhausted, just to spend an hour with her. They would walk or sit on the porch, talking about their future, making plans, learning everything about each other. Samuel told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents to fever, about the responsibility of caring for his younger sister until she was old enough to marry. He told her about the loneliness of drifting, about the emptiness of having no home to return to. He told her his dreams in detail, the small ranch he wanted to build, the horses he wanted to raise, the life he wanted to create. Emma told him her own stories, about growing up in Wyoming, about the harsh winters and beautiful springs, about her fear that she would never find real love. She told him about the books she dreamed of reading, about wanting to see the mountains up close, about hoping for children someday who would grow up secure and loved. "How many children do you want?" Samuel asked one evening. They were sitting by the creek that ran through the Rutherford property, watching the water flow by in the fading light. Emma blushed. "I do not know, 3 or 4 maybe. I always wanted a big family. What about you?" "As many as we are blessed with," Samuel said simply. "Though I hope we have at least one son to help with the ranch work when he is older." "And daughters," Emma teased. "What if we only have daughters?" "Then I will be surrounded by beautiful women who have me wrapped around their fingers, just like their mother," Samuel said with a grin. He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Emma, I want you to know something. I grew up with very little. I know what it is like to go hungry, to patch the same pair of pants a dozen times, to make do with less. I cannot promise you luxury. I cannot promise you the kind of life Gerald could have given you." "Samuel, let me finish," he said gently. "I cannot promise you luxury, but I can promise you love. I can promise you that I will work every day to provide for you and any children we have. I can promise you honesty and loyalty and a partner who values you above everything else. That is all I have to offer, but it is yours completely if you want it." Emma reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under her palm. "That is everything I want, you understand? You are everything I want." Samuel turned his head and kissed her palm. a gesture so tender that Emma felt tears welling up. "I am the luckiest man alive," he whispered. As December approached, preparations for the wedding moved forward. It would be a simple ceremony in the small church, with a reception at the Rutherford home afterward. Emma made her own dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored wool that would be practical for winter. Samuel bought a new suit with part of his savings, insisting that he wanted to look his best for his bride. The town's attitude toward them had shifted over the 2 months of their engagement. At first, there had been plenty of gossip and disapproval, people saying Emma was too hasty, that she was throwing herself at the first man who showed interest after her humiliation. But Samuel's steady devotion and obvious love for Emma won people over. Even those who had initially disapproved found themselves charmed by the young cowboy who looked at Emma Rutherford like she hung the moon. One person who was not happy was Gerald Winters. He and his new fiancée, Millicent, were still in Laramie, making preparations for their own wedding, which was planned for January. Emma occasionally saw them in town and did her best to avoid them, but 2 weeks before her wedding to Samuel, she had an encounter she could not escape. She was at the general store buying supplies for the wedding reception when Gerald cornered her near the fabric display. "Emma, I need to speak with you," he said urgently, keeping his voice low. Emma looked around for an escape, but the store was crowded and she could not leave without making a scene. "I have nothing to say to you, Gerald. Please, just listen," he said. "I made a mistake. I know that now. You should not be marrying that cowboy. He has nothing to offer you." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "You ended our engagement because my dowry was stolen. You made it very clear that I was not worth marrying without that money. Now you have found a wealthier bride, and you have the audacity to tell me I should not marry the man I love." "I was pressured by my father," Gerald said, a whine entering his voice. "He insisted on the dowry, but I realize now that you were the better choice. Millicent is vapid and demanding. She does not understand me the way you did." "I never understood you, Gerald," Emma said coldly. "I never even knew you, and you never bothered to know me. Samuel has shown me in 2 months more care and attention than you showed me in 8. He values me for who I am, not for what I can bring him. That is the difference between a real man and a coward." Gerald's face flushed with anger. "You are making a mistake. You will end up in some broken-down shack, working your fingers to the bone, married to a man who can barely provide for you. When you realize what you have done, do not come crying to me." "I will never come to you for anything," Emma said. "Now excuse me. I have a wedding to prepare for." She walked away with her head high, her hands shaking with anger but her heart full of certainty. She had made the right choice. Samuel was worth 100 Gerald Winterses. She told Samuel about the encounter that evening, and his face darkened with anger. "I want to knock his teeth in," Samuel said bluntly. "Pardon my language, but that man has no right to speak to you that way." "It does not matter," Emma said, taking his hand. "He can say whatever he wants. It will not change anything between us." Samuel pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "2 more weeks," he murmured. "2 more weeks and you will be my wife, and no one will ever disrespect you again without answering to me." The week before the wedding brought the first major snowstorm of the season. Emma stood at her window, watching the snow pile up, and worried that the storm would ruin their wedding day. But Samuel came riding through the snow that evening anyway, determined to see her. "Nothing could keep me away," he said, stamping snow off his boots on the porch. "Not weather, not distance, nothing. I needed to see you." They sat by the fire while Emma's parents discreetly gave them privacy, and Samuel pulled a small package from his coat pocket. "I know we agreed not to exchange gifts until the wedding," he said, "but I wanted you to have this now." Emma unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like a horse. It was simple but beautiful, clearly chosen with care. "Samuel, it is lovely," Emma breathed. "The horse is for the brand I want to use on our ranch someday," Samuel explained. "When we have our own place, I wanted you to have something that symbolizes our future together." He took the necklace and fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle on her skin. "There, perfect." Emma touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her chest. "I will wear it every day. Even when we are old and gray and have a house full of grandchildren," Samuel teased. "Especially then," Emma said. "I will wear it until the day I die as a reminder of this moment, of how much you love me." Samuel's expression grew serious. "Emma, I need to tell you something. I wrote to my sister in Texas, told her I was getting married. I sent her some money and invited her to come live with us if she wants to. I hope that is all right." "Of course it is," Emma said immediately. "She is your family. Any family of yours is family of mine." She wrote back, Samuel continued. "She is happy for me, but she is married now herself and settled in Texas. She says she wants to meet you someday, but she cannot make it to the wedding. She sent us her blessing and a little money as a wedding gift." He pulled out a folded bill. $20. "It is not much, but it was kind of her." Emma was touched. "That was generous of her. We should write back and thank her." "We will," Samuel promised. "I want her to know you, to see how wonderful you are." The snow continued to fall all week, but by the day before the wedding it had stopped, leaving Laramie blanketed in white. Emma stood in her bedroom, looking at her wedding dress hanging on the wardrobe, and felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" her mother asked, coming in with a cup of tea. "More ready than I have ever been for anything," Emma said. "Mama, did you feel this way before you married Papa?" Margaret smiled. "I did. I was terrified and thrilled all at once. But I knew your father was a good man, and that has made all the difference. Samuel is a good man, Emma. You have chosen well." "I know," Emma said softly. I wish Papa still had his savings. I wish the dowry had not been stolen. I feel like I am coming to Samuel with nothing." "You are coming to him with yourself," Margaret said firmly. "And that is everything he wants. You heard him say it in front of the whole town. He does not need money to love you." Emma nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I know, and I am so grateful for him. I just wish the people who stole from us faced some consequence." "The world is not always just," her mother said gently. "But sometimes our happiness is the best revenge. You will build a good life with Samuel, and that will be justice enough." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Emma woke early, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. Her mother and two neighbors came to help her dress, pinning up her hair and lacing her into the cream wool dress she had made. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a different woman than the one who had opened her dowry trunk 3 months ago. That woman had been planning a safe, predictable future. This woman was stepping into the unknown with a cowboy she loved, and she was not afraid. The church was small and warm when they arrived, heated by a wood stove and decorated with pine boughs and ribbon. There were perhaps 30 people in the pews, close friends and family, ranch hands from the Triple Creek who had come to support Samuel, and a few townspeople who had grown fond of the young couple. Emma stood at the back of the church, her arm linked through her father's, and looked down the aisle to where Samuel waited. He stood straight and tall in his new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes fixed on her with such love and joy that Emma felt her heart might burst. "You are absolutely certain?" Thomas asked one last time. "Absolutely, Papa," Emma said. They walked down the aisle together, and Thomas placed Emma's hand in Samuel's with a gruff "Take care of her." "I will, sir," Samuel promised. "Every day of my life." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Emma and Samuel exchanged vows in voices that rang clear through the small church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Emma with a tenderness that brought tears to more than one eye in the congregation. The reception at the Rutherford home was a modest but happy affair. There was food and music and dancing. Samuel never left Emma's side, his arm around her waist, his eyes constantly finding hers across the room. When they danced together, Emma felt like she was floating. "Happy," Samuel murmured in her ear. "So happy I could burst," Emma replied. "You?" "I've been happy since the day I met you," Samuel said. "But today, I am beyond happy. I do not even have words for what I am feeling." As the afternoon wore on, guests began to drift away. Samuel and Emma would spend their first night as husband and wife in the small house, as Thomas and Margaret would stay with neighbors to give them privacy. Emma felt nervousness mixing with her happiness as the reality of marriage, of sharing her life completely with Samuel, settled over her. When the last guest had gone and they were finally alone, Samuel took both of Emma's hands in his. "I know this is all new and may be frightening," he said gently. "We can take things as slowly as you need. I do not want you to be afraid of me." Emma looked up at her husband, at his kind, honest face, and felt her nervousness fade. "I am not afraid," she said. "I trust you, Samuel, completely." That night, as the snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Emma discovered what it meant to be truly loved, to be cherished and valued and treated like something precious. Samuel was gentle and patient, and by the time dawn broke, Emma knew she had made the right choice in every possible way. The next few months were a period of adjustment and joy. Emma moved into the bunkhouse at the Triple Creek Ranch with Samuel, which was far from ideal but necessary until they could afford a place of their own. The bunkhouse was rough, just a long room with a dozen bunks and a stove, but the ranch owner, John Sterling, allowed Samuel to partition off one corner with blankets for privacy. Emma made the best of it, hanging fabric to create walls, arranging their few possessions to make the space feel like home. The other ranch hands were respectful and kind, treating Emma with careful courtesy. She cooked for them sometimes, and in return they helped with small tasks, bringing her water or firewood, teaching her about ranch life. Samuel worked long, hard days, but he always came back to Emma in the evenings with a smile and some small treasure he had found during his day: a pretty rock, a bird's feather, once a perfect circle of ice that caught the light like crystal. They would sit together in their small corner of the bunkhouse, talking quietly, making plans for the future. "I have been talking to Mr. Sterling," Samuel said one cold February evening. "He mentioned there is a small plot of land adjacent to the Triple Creek that might be available for purchase, 20 acres with a creek running through it. He said if I can come up with $100, he would loan me the rest and let me pay it back over time." Emma's eyes widened. "Samuel, that is wonderful. Do we have $100? "Almost," Samuel said. "Between my savings and what I have earned since we married, I have about $80. If I can save another 20 by spring, we could make an offer." "I have been doing some sewing for the other ranchers' wives," Emma said. "I have earned a few dollars, and I could do more. Maybe I could sell baked goods in town on market days." Samuel looked troubled. "Emma, I do not want you working yourself to death. You already do so much." "I want to help," Emma said firmly. "This is our dream, Samuel, our future. I want to be part of building it." They worked together over the next months, both of them taking on extra work whenever possible. Emma sewed and baked and took in laundry. Samuel worked extra hours, took on additional tasks, even helped build a barn for a neighboring rancher on his days off in exchange for cash. They lived frugally, spending almost nothing on themselves, saving every penny toward their dream. By April, they had the $100. Samuel rode into town with Emma to meet with the land agent and John Sterling. The negotiations took most of the afternoon, but by the time they left, they had an agreement. The 20 acres were theirs, with a loan from Mr. Sterling to be paid back over 5 years at fair interest. "We have land," Samuel said, his voice full of wonder as they rode back toward the Triple Creek. "We have our own land, Emma." Emma felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "We do. We really do." They spent every free moment that spring and summer on their new property. It was beautiful land with the creek Samuel had mentioned, good grass for grazing, and a small grove of cottonwood trees. They camped there on Samuel's days off, planning where they would build their house, where they would put a corral, how they would fence the property. "We cannot afford to build much at first," Samuel said, always the practical one. "Maybe just a one-room cabin to start. We can add on as we save more money." "I do not need a big house," Emma said. "As long as we are together, that is all that matters." They started building in June. Samuel and several of the other hands from the Triple Creek helped, and by August they had a small but solid cabin with one room, a stone fireplace, and a loft for sleeping. It was rough and simple, but to Emma it was a palace because it was theirs. They moved in on a warm September evening, exactly 1 year after they had first met. Samuel carried Emma over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down in the middle of their new home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Stone," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Home," Emma repeated, the word feeling perfect on her tongue. "Our home." They had very little furniture, just a table and chairs that Samuel had built, a bed frame made from rough lumber, a few pots and pans. But Emma made curtains from flour sacks and hung wildflowers in jars, and slowly the cabin began to feel like a real home. Samuel continued working at the Triple Creek during the day while slowly building up their own small herd with the money he earned. They started with 2 cows and a calf, then added a few more as they could afford them. Samuel had a gift for working with horses, and he began taking on side jobs breaking and training horses for other ranchers, which brought in additional income. Emma tended a garden behind the cabin, raising vegetables that supplemented their diet and that she could sell or trade in town. She kept chickens for eggs and meat. She continued sewing and baking for others when time allowed. Their life was hard, full of work from dawn to dusk, but Emma had never been happier. One evening in late October, as they sat by their fireplace after a long day of work, Emma realized she had missed her monthly cycle. She had not said anything to Samuel yet, wanting to be certain, but she was almost sure now. She was carrying their first child. She waited until she was completely certain, until she had missed a second cycle and began feeling the telltale nausea of early pregnancy. Then on a cold November evening she told Samuel as they were getting ready for bed. "Samuel, I have something to tell you," she said, her hands twisting nervously in her nightgown. He turned to her immediately, concern on his face. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Emma said, a smile breaking across her face. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Samuel stared at her for a long moment, as if he could not quite process the words. Then his face transformed with pure joy. He swept Emma into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are having a baby. Emma, I do not even have words. I am so happy. Are you happy? Are you scared? How are you feeling?" Emma laughed at the tumble of questions. "I am happy. A little scared, yes, but mostly happy. I think the baby will come in June, judging by my calculations, and I am feeling well, aside from some morning sickness." Samuel set her down gently, as if she were made of glass. "You should not be working so hard. You need to rest. Let me take care of everything." "Samuel, I am pregnant, not fragile," Emma said with amusement. "I can still work. I will just be more careful." But Samuel insisted on taking over the heavier chores, chopping all the wood, hauling all the water, doing anything that required significant physical effort. He fussed over Emma constantly, making sure she ate enough, that she was not too tired, that she was warm enough. It was endearing and occasionally exasperating, but Emma loved him all the more for his care. As winter set in and Emma's pregnancy became visible, the women of the community rallied around her. Margaret Rutherford came by frequently to help and to bring supplies. The ranchers' wives whose sewing Emma had done brought baby clothes and blankets. Even women Emma barely knew stopped by with advice and offers of help. "You have made a good name for yourself," one older woman told Emma as she dropped off a basket of baby items. "You and that husband of yours. People respect how hard you work and how devoted you are to each other. This community takes care of its own." Emma was touched by the kindness. She had worried that her broken engagement and hasty remarriage would mark her permanently as scandalous, but instead, people seemed to have embraced her love story with Samuel. The cowboy who declared he did not need money for love had won hearts throughout the county. Christmas that year was simple but beautiful. Samuel cut down a small pine tree, and Emma decorated it with strings of dried berries and popcorn. They exchanged modest gifts: new gloves Emma had knitted for Samuel, a rocking chair Samuel had been secretly building for Emma to use with the baby. They spent the day with Emma's parents, eating a good meal and talking about the future. "I cannot believe I am going to be a grandfather," Thomas said, looking at Emma's swollen belly with wonder. "Seems like just yesterday you were a little girl yourself." "Time has a way of moving forward whether we are ready or not," Samuel said, his hand resting protectively on Emma's shoulder. "But I am ready for this. More than ready." Winter was hard. The temperatures dropped well below freezing and snow piled up around their small cabin. Samuel had to break ice on the creek for water and spent long hours making sure their small herd of cattle did not freeze or starve. Emma stayed inside as much as possible, keeping the fire going and working on sewing projects by lamplight. But even in the hardest moments, Emma was happy. She would watch Samuel come in from the cold, his face red and his hands nearly frozen, and feel overwhelmed with love for this man who worked himself to exhaustion to provide for their growing family. She would feel the baby moving inside her and think about the future they were building together, and she would know that every hardship was worth it. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought warmth and new growth. Emma's belly was enormous now, and moving was difficult, but she insisted on helping plant the garden. Samuel finally put his foot down and made her sit on a chair and supervise while he did the actual planting. "You are worse than a mother hen," Emma grumbled, but she was secretly grateful for the rest. "I am going to be a father hen soon," Samuel said with a grin. "I need the practice." The baby came on a warm June evening, 3 days before what would have been Emma and Gerald's wedding anniversary, had that wedding ever happened. Emma sometimes thought about that strange twist of fate, how losing her dowry and her first engagement had led her to Samuel, and this life that was far richer than anything Gerald could have offered. The labor was long and hard. Emma's mother and 2 other experienced women were there to help, and Samuel paced outside the cabin, his face drawn with worry every time Emma cried out. But when it was finally over and the baby's first wail split the air, Samuel burst into the cabin despite the women's protests about propriety. "Is Emma all right? Is the baby all right?" he demanded, pushing his way to the bed where Emma lay exhausted and sweaty but smiling. "We are fine," Emma said tiredly. "Samuel, we have a son. A beautiful, healthy son." Samuel looked down at the tiny bundle in Emma's arms, at the red, wrinkled face and tiny fists, and Emma saw tears streaming down his face. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." He touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. "Hello, little one, I am your papa." They named him Thomas Samuel Stone, after both his grandfathers. Little Tommy, as they called him, was a robust baby with a powerful set of lungs. He kept them up most nights for the first few months, but neither Emma nor Samuel minded. They would take turns walking him around the cabin, singing to him, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love you," Samuel told Emma one night as they watched Tommy sleep in the cradle Samuel had made. "But now I love you even more because you gave me this gift. You gave me our son." Emma leaned against her husband, bone-tired but content. "We made him together. This is our family, Samuel, the family we built from nothing." "Not from nothing," Samuel corrected gently. "We built it from love. That is worth more than any dowry ever could be." The next few years passed in a blur of work and growth. Their small ranch slowly expanded. Samuel's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and he was in constant demand, which brought in steady income. They added more cattle, fenced more of their property, and built a small barn and corral. When Tommy was 2, they added another room to the cabin, and when Emma became pregnant again, they built on a 3rd room. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose after Emma's mother, was born in the spring of 1886. She was a quieter baby than Tommy had been, with dark hair like her father and Emma's blue eyes. Samuel absolutely doted on her, and Emma often found him just sitting and holding her, staring at her in wonder. "You are going to spoil that child," Emma said with amusement one afternoon. "Absolutely," Samuel agreed without shame. "She is my little princess. I am allowed to spoil her." Life was not always easy. There were hard winters when they struggled to keep the cattle alive, dry summers when the creek ran low and they worried about water. There were illnesses, injuries, and setbacks. But through it all, Emma and Samuel faced everything together, their love never wavering. Tommy grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride and rope almost as soon as he could walk. Little Rose was more thoughtful, content to sit with Emma and help with small tasks or play with her rag dolls. Emma taught both children to read and write, determined that they would have the education she had valued. In 1888, when Emma was pregnant with their 3rd child, Samuel came home one day with exciting news. John Sterling was retiring and selling off parcels of the Triple Creek Ranch. The 40 acres adjacent to their property was available for purchase at a good price. "We could double our land," Samuel said, his eyes shining. "We have enough saved for a down payment, and Mr. Sterling says he would loan us the rest. Emma, we could build this into a real ranch, something to pass on to our children." They bought the land, and suddenly they had 60 acres. It seemed like a vast estate to Emma, who still remembered the tiny corner of the bunkhouse where they had started their marriage. Samuel hired on a young cowboy to help with the additional work, and slowly their operation grew. Their 3rd child, another son they named William, was born that fall. He was a happy, easy baby who rarely cried and slept through the night from an early age, much to his exhausted parents' relief. 3 children, Samuel said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Tommy and Rose play in the yard while baby William slept in Emma's arms. 3 healthy, beautiful children. a growing ranch, a home we built with our own hands. Emma, do you remember when I told you I did not need money to love you? I remember, Emma said softly. It was the day everything changed. I meant it then, and I mean it even more now, Samuel said. We have built something incredible, but not because of money. We built it because we loved each other enough to work for it, to sacrifice for it, to believe in it even when things were hard. That is worth more than any dowry. Emma looked around at their ranch, at their children, at the life they had created together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my dowry had not been stolen? If I had married Gerald? I try not to, Samuel admitted. The thought of you with someone else, especially someone who did not appreciate you, makes me sick to my stomach. But I suppose in a strange way I should thank whoever stole that money. They gave me the chance to meet you and love you and build this life with you. I would thank them too if I knew who they were, Emma said. Though I admit, sometimes I am still angry about it. That money was my father's life savings. It was not right that someone took it. No, it was not right, Samuel agreed. But we cannot change the past. We can only build the future, and our future looks pretty bright to me. In 1890, when Tommy was 7, Rose was 5, and William was 2, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. She was 30 years old now, no longer the young woman who had opened that empty dowry trunk 8 years earlier. She had wrinkles at the corners of her eyes from squinting into the sun, calluses on her hands from hard work, and silver strands starting to show in her dark hair. But she had never been more beautiful or more content. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. Emma was older and more tired, and the pregnancy made her sick for months. Samuel insisted she rest as much as possible, taking over even more of the household work and hiring a young woman from town to come help with the children and cooking. Their 4th child, another daughter they named Sarah, was born on a cold January morning in 1891. The birth was difficult, and afterward the doctor took Samuel aside and told him that Emma should not have any more children. Another pregnancy could be dangerous for her health. Samuel was shaken by the news, but his first priority was always Emma. "Whatever you need," he told her as she recovered. "Whatever keeps you safe and healthy. We have 4 beautiful children. That is more than enough blessing for any man." Emma agreed, though part of her was sad that their family was complete. But looking at her 4 children, at Tommy, who was already becoming a competent young rancher, at Rose, who was sweet and helpful, at William, who was full of mischief, and at baby Sarah, who looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes, Emma felt nothing but gratitude. As the children grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Samuel's horse training business brought in steady money, and their cattle herd had grown to nearly 100 head. They had expanded the house again, adding a 2nd floor with real bedrooms for the children. They had proper furniture now, a beautiful table Samuel had commissioned from a carpenter in town, beds with real mattresses, even a piano that Emma had learned to play as a girl and now was teaching Rose. Tommy announced at 14 that he wanted to be a rancher like his father. Samuel began teaching him everything: how to manage the herd, how to train horses, how to handle money and make business decisions. Rose showed an interest in healing and helped Emma tend to sick animals and injured ranch hands. William was the wild one, always getting into scrapes and adventures. And little Sarah was the baby everyone doted on, spoiled by parents and siblings alike. In the summer of 1895, when Emma was 35 and Samuel was 37, they took a rare trip to Cheyenne. They left the children with Emma's parents and spent 3 days in the city, staying in a nice hotel and acting like newlyweds again. On their last day, as they were walking through the downtown area, Emma saw a familiar face. Gerald Winters stood across the street, looking older and somehow diminished. He was alone, his clothes expensive but slightly rumpled, and he had the look of a man who drank too much. Emma recognized him immediately, though she would have walked past him without acknowledgement if he had not seen her, and stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the street. Then Gerald crossed toward them and Samuel's hand tightened protectively on Emma's arm. "Emma," Gerald said, his voice rough, "it has been a long time." 13 years, Emma said calmly. "You look well, Gerald." It was a lie, but a polite one. "You look happy," Gerald said, and there was something bitter in his tone. "You are the woman from the ranch, I assume?" He looked at Samuel. "I am her husband," Samuel said, his voice hard. "We met briefly a long time ago. I am Samuel Stone." "Stone," Gerald repeated. "Yes, I remember." "The cowboy who did not need money for love." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "How did that work out for you? Are you rich now?" "Living in luxury, we are happy," Emma said firmly. "We have a ranch, 4 children, and a good life. That is all I ever wanted." 4 children, Gerald said, something like regret flashing across his face. "I have none. Millicent left me after 2 years, took half my father's money in the divorce. My father died 3 years ago, left me with debts I am still trying to pay off. I live alone in a rented room and work as a clerk." He looked at Emma with hollow eyes. "You were right that day in the general store. I made a terrible mistake." Emma felt a flash of pity for the man, but it was tempered by memory. "You made the choice that felt right to you at the time, Gerald." "We both did, and we both have to live with those choices." "I could have been happy with you," Gerald said. "If I had not been so focused on money, on status, on what my father wanted, I could have had what he has." He gestured at Samuel. "No," Samuel said quietly but firmly. "You could not have. Because you never loved Emma, not really. You loved what she represented, what she could do for you, but you never saw her for who she really is, the way I did from the moment I met her. That is the difference between us." Gerald flinched as if struck. "Maybe you are right. Maybe I was never capable of loving anyone the way you clearly love her." He looked at Emma one last time. "I am glad you are happy, Emma. Truly. You deserved better than what I could give you." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd, and Emma watched him go with mixed feelings. Once she had thought she would marry that man. Once she had planned a future with him. Now he was a stranger, a sad figure from her past, while Samuel stood beside her, solid and real and beloved. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked, his arm around her waist. "I am more than all right," Emma said, turning to look up at her husband. "I am grateful, seeing him, seeing what my life could have been. Samuel, I am so glad my dowry was stolen. I am so glad that engagement ended, because it led me to you." Samuel pulled her close, right there on the street in Cheyenne, and kissed her in full view of anyone who cared to look. "I am glad, too. Every single day I am glad." They returned home to their ranch, to their children, to the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Tommy married a sweet girl from town when he was 22 and built a house on the far end of the ranch. He and his wife gave Emma and Samuel their first grandchild in 1902, a little girl they named Emma after her grandmother. Rose became a skilled healer and married a doctor who came to practice in Laramie. They stayed in town but visited the ranch often, and Rose helped deliver babies and tend to the sick throughout the county. William, true to his wild nature, joined up with a cattle drive heading to Montana and sent letters home about his adventures. He eventually settled in Montana with a wife he met there, a rancher's daughter who could ride and rope as well as any man. Sarah, the baby, stayed closest to home. She married young, at 19, to a neighboring rancher's son, and they built a house just a few miles from Emma and Samuel. By 1910, Emma and Samuel were in their 50s, their dark hair now thoroughly streaked with gray. Samuel moved a bit slower than he used to, his joints stiff from years of hard work, but he still worked every day on the ranch, training horses and tending cattle. Emma's hands were gnarled from arthritis, but she still kept a garden and sewed quilts for each new grandchild. They had 8 grandchildren now, with more surely on the way. The ranch had grown to nearly 300 acres, worked by Tommy and several hired hands. The small cabin where Emma and Samuel had started their married life still stood, now used as a storage shed, a reminder of how far they had come. One evening in late summer, Emma and Samuel sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a scene they had watched together thousands of times, but it never got old. "You remember the day we met?" Emma asked, taking Samuel's hand in hers. "Like it was yesterday," Samuel said. "You were sitting on your porch, looking sad and lost. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and I wanted to take that sadness away." "You did," Emma said softly. "You took it away and gave me joy instead. You gave me everything, Samuel. A home, a family, a love I never knew was possible." "I did not give you anything you did not give me," Samuel replied. "We built this together, Emma, equal partners from the start. I wish I could go back and tell that frightened girl opening her empty dowry trunk what was coming," Emma said. "I would tell her not to cry, not to despair. I would tell her that losing that money was the best thing that could have happened because it brought her to you. I wish I could go back and tell that young cowboy riding up to a strange house looking for work that he was about to meet the woman who would change his entire life," Samuel said. "I would tell him to be brave enough to fall in love, to take the risk, to say the words that needed saying." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, watching the stars begin to appear. Around them, the ranch they had built from nothing but love and hard work hummed with life. In the house behind them, they could hear their daughter Sarah and her family visiting for supper, the sound of children's laughter and happy voices. "You have any regrets?" Emma asked. Samuel thought for a long moment. "Only one," he said finally. "I regret that we have only one lifetime together. I would like about 10 more." Emma laughed, the sound clear and joyful in the evening air. "10 lifetimes, with my cooking, especially with your cooking," Samuel said with a grin. "Though maybe in the next lifetime I will learn to cook so you can rest." "In the next lifetime I want to meet you sooner," Emma said. "I want more years with you, not fewer." "We will have to come back as children who grow up together," Samuel suggested. "Fall in love young and have 60 or 70 years instead of just 40 or 50. "I like that plan," Emma said. "But even if we do not get another lifetime, Samuel, I want you to know that this one was enough. This one was perfect. You made it perfect." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Emma Stone. I loved you the moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Emma said. "My cowboy who did not need money for love, my partner, my best friend, my everything." As the stars wheeled overhead and the night settled gently over the Wyoming prairie, Emma and Samuel Stone sat together in the peace and contentment of a life well lived. They had started with nothing but love, and that love had proved to be worth more than any fortune. It had built a home, raised a family, created a legacy that would continue for generations. The dowry that was stolen all those years ago had seemed like a disaster at the time, the end of Emma's carefully planned future. But it had actually been a beginning, the start of something far better than she could have imagined. Because Samuel had been right all along. He did not need money for love. Love itself had been enough to build a rich and beautiful life, full of children and grandchildren, hard work and success, struggles overcome and joys celebrated. And as Emma drifted off to sleep that night, her hand still held in Samuel's, she sent a silent thank you into the universe for the thief who had stolen her dowry and set her on the path to real happiness. That theft, which had seemed like such a terrible wrong, had actually been the greatest blessing of her life. It had taken away money that would have tied her to the wrong man and left her free to find the right one. The years continued to pass, each one adding new chapters to the Stone family story. More grandchildren were born, and then great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under Tommy's management, and eventually his son took over, carrying on the tradition Samuel had started. Emma and Samuel celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1932, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They were both in their 70s then, worn by time but still devoted to each other. Samuel could barely see anymore, his eyes clouded by cataracts, but he still knew Emma by her touch, her voice, her presence. Emma's hands were crippled by arthritis and her hair was snow white, but Samuel still told her every day that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever known. They both lived to see the start of another decade. Samuel passing peacefully in his sleep in 1933 at the age of 75. Emma following him just 6 months later, unable to imagine life without her beloved partner. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery outside Laramie, their headstones simple but inscribed with words their children had chosen. United in life, united in death, united in love for all eternity. The ranch they had built continued for generations, a testament to what two people could create when they valued love over money, partnership over status, genuine connection over calculated arrangement. And though the details of their story faded with time, the essence of it remained, passed down through the family like a precious heirloom. Emma's great-great-granddaughter, researching family history in the 1980s, found an old letter Emma had written late in life, meant to be opened after her death. In it, Emma told the story of the stolen dowry, of the broken engagement of the cowboy who said he did not need money for love. She wrote about the life she and Samuel had built, about the love that had sustained them through 50 years of marriage, about the ranch that had started with 20 acres and grown into a thriving operation. And she ended with these words: "If you are reading this, you are part of the legacy Samuel and I created. We started with nothing but love, and look what came from it. Remember that money cannot buy happiness, status cannot create devotion, and security based on wealth alone is an illusion. What matters is finding someone who values you for who you are, who will work beside you to build a life, who will love you through every hardship and celebrate every joy. That is what Samuel was to me. That is what I hope you find for yourself. Love truly is worth more than any dowry, more than any fortune. It is the only thing worth having, and the only thing that lasts forever." The letter was framed and hung in the main house of what was now a large, successful ranch spanning thousands of acres. But the small cabin where Emma and Samuel had started their life together was preserved too, maintained as a reminder of humble beginnings and the power of love to build something extraordinary from almost nothing. And so the story of Emma Rutherford and Samuel Stone lived on, a tale of how a theft that seemed like a tragedy became the catalyst for a great love story, of how a cowboy's simple declaration that he did not need money for love proved to be prophetic, and of how two people who started with nothing but each other built a legacy that lasted for generations. It was a story that reminded anyone who heard it that true wealth is measured not in money, but in love, family, and the life you build together with someone who sees your worth beyond any dowry or bank account. It was a story of the real Wild West, where fortunes could be made or lost in an instant. But true love, once found, could weather any storm and last a lifetime.